The armchair still holds the shape of my wife Eleanor, even after all these years. I see it sometimes, the faint impression in the worn leather, as if she only just stood up to put the kettle on. From this chair I can see the photograph on the mantelpiece, a smiling, sun-bleached image of our son Leo at 7 years old, building a lopsided sandcastle with his mother. Her laugh is trapped forever in that glossy paper. It's a perfect memory, a perfect day. But the thing about photographs, the thing no one ever tells you, is that they are professional liars. They capture the 1 second of peace in an hour of argument, the single smile in a day of quiet sorrow. They sell you a story you want to believe. How can a memory that feels so warm be the start of the coldest day of your life? Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. I suppose the whole thing started not with malice, but with a deep, aching silence. After Eleanor passed, the house grew too large for one person. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was a physical weight in the air. My son Leo and his wife Clara would visit. They'd bring my granddaughter Maya, who was growing so fast she seemed a different child with every visit. But their stops were always brief, clinical. They were fulfilling a duty, not sharing a life. They'd sit on the edge of the sofa, the one Eleanor and I bought together, as if they were afraid of getting too comfortable, of letting the silence of the house seep into them. They'd ask the same questions. "How are you doing, Dad? Eating okay? Need anything from the store?" The questions were just noise to fill the space. They weren't listening for the answers. They were waiting for the acceptable amount of time to pass before they could politely escape back to their own loud, vibrant, forward-moving lives. I saw it in Leo's eyes. He loved me, I think, in the way you love a landmark from your childhood. You're fond of it, you'd be sad if it was torn down, but you don't actually visit it much anymore. I was becoming a landmark, a piece of his history, not his present. And Maya, she was a stranger who shared my blood. She lived inside her phone, her tablet, a world of bright screens and tinny sounds I couldn't enter. I wanted to give her a memory, a real one, not a photograph of a perfect moment, but the moment itself. That's where the $30,000 came in. It was the last of the money Eleanor and I had saved, the rainy day fund we never touched. But the rain had already come and gone, and all it left was a drought. I decided to make it rain one last time. A grand gesture. The kind of thing you can't ignore, the kind of memory that burns itself into a child's mind forever. Hawaii. 10 days of sun and sea and stories. A 5-star resort with a pool that snaked through lush gardens. I pictured Maya's face not illuminated by a screen, but by a sunset over the Pacific. I imagined Leo and I talking, really talking, the way we did when he was a boy and his world was small enough for me to be at its center. I saw Clara relaxing, the tense lines around her mouth finally softening. This trip, this grand, expensive, beautiful trip, was going to be the glue. It was going to piece our fractured family back together. When I called them to tell them, the reaction was muted. I'd expected gasps, maybe even tears of joy. Instead, there was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Dad, that's incredibly generous," Leo said, his voice tight. I could hear Clara whispering in the background, sharp and indistinct like an insect buzzing. "It's all taken care of," I said, my voice booming with a forced cheerfulness I didn't quite feel. "First-class tickets, the best suite they had, all of it. All you have to do is pack." Another pause. Then Clara's voice, smooth as polished glass, came on the line. "Arthur, we're speechless. It's just a lot. A lot." That was the word she chose. Not wonderful, not amazing. A lot. Have you ever ignored that little voice in your gut telling you something is wrong? That little whisper that says they're not happy, they're cornered. I wish I had listened. But I wanted my dream so badly that I chose to hear what I wanted to hear. Leo got back on the phone. "Look, Dad, to make it easier on you, Why don't you transfer the money to my account? I can handle all the bookings from here, the flights, the hotel, the confirmation numbers. I'll just forward you everything. You won't have to worry about a thing. It made sense. I wasn't as good with the online world of bookings and e-tickets. It felt like a son helping his aging father, a sign that he was in this with me. So I did it. The next day, I went to the bank and transferred the entire $30,000. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, looked at the amount. "Big plans, sir?" she asked with a smile. "The biggest," I'd replied, feeling a genuine surge of hope for the first time in months. The weeks leading up to the departure were a blur of preparation. I bought a new suitcase, my old leather one finally giving up the ghost. I bought 3 new Hawaiian shirts, loud with hibiscus and palm trees, the kind Eleanor would have teased me about. I laid them out on my bed, the colors looking garish and hopeful against her old floral quilt. Every night, I'd pack and repack, imagining the warm air on my skin. I'd pull out the old photograph from the mantelpiece and tuck it carefully into my carry-on bag. We were going to make a new one, a better one. The emails with the itinerary arrived from Leo's address. They looked professional, official. Flight numbers, seat assignments, hotel confirmations. My name was right there next to theirs. Arthur, Leo, Clara, Maya. A family unit, printed in black and white. Proof. The morning of the trip, I was up before the sun. I'd barely slept, buzzing with the kind of nervous excitement I hadn't felt since my wedding day. I sat in my armchair, sipping coffee that I couldn't taste, watching the sky lighten from charcoal to a soft, promising gray. When their car pulled into my driveway, it felt real. It was finally happening. Leo honked the horn twice, a short, impatient sound. I grabbed my bags, took one last look around the quiet house, and walked out to them. The car ride was suffocating. Maya was in the back, headphones on, her face a pale blue in the glow of her tablet. Clara was in the passenger seat staring out the window, her jaw set. Leo drove with a grim efficiency, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. My attempts at conversation died in the thick, silent air. "They say the snorkeling at Hanauma Bay is like swimming in an aquarium," I offered. Leo just grunted in response. Clara didn't even turn her head. The silence was back, heavier than ever, right there in the car with us. We pulled up to the curb at the airport's departure level. The sliding doors hissed open and shut, swallowing and spitting out travelers in a chaotic dance. For a moment, watching them, I felt a pang of pure joy. We were about to join them. We were about to escape. I reached for my door handle, my heart thumping. "Well, we're here," I said, the words sounding small and foolish. As I moved to get out, to grab my new suitcase from the trunk and step into our grand adventure, Leo killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. He turned to me, but he didn't look at me. He looked at the steering wheel, at his own white-knuckled hands. Clara continued to stare straight ahead, as if watching a film only she could see. "Dad," Leo began, and his voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a stranger. "Before we go inside, about the tickets, there's something we need to tell you." His voice was the worst part. It was a perfectly level, perfectly empty thing, like a field of concrete after a building has been demolished. It held no anger, no sadness, not even any guilt. It was the sound of a transaction being completed. What do you do when the world tilts sideways so fast that you can't even feel yourself falling? My first thought wasn't anger. It was a strange, nonsensical flicker of concern. Had I heard him right? Was he feeling all right? The sounds of the airport outside the car, the rumble of a shuttle bus, the distant, cheerful chime of a terminal announcement suddenly seemed to be coming from miles away, muffled by a thick wall of glass. I could hear the blood pounding in my own ears, a slow, heavy drumbeat. Forgot? The word felt foreign in my mouth, thick and clumsy like a piece of unchewed food. "Leo, what are you talking about? It's an e-ticket. It's in the email. You just show them the phone." I was trying to solve it. My mind, bless its naive and stubborn heart, was still trying to fix the problem, still assuming it was a simple, logical error that could be undone. I was a mechanic trying to repair a car that the driver had already decided to push off a cliff. He finally turned his head, and for a second I saw my son, not the man sitting there, but the 7-year-old in the photograph, the boy with the scraped knee I'd carried home from the park. His eyes were the same shade of blue. But then the man returned, and his eyes were flat, like stones at the bottom of a river. "It's not on the phone, Dad," he said. "When I was booking everything, there was a glitch with the last ticket. It didn't go through." A glitch. A word so sterile, so technical. A word used to erase intention, to blame the invisible machinery of the world for a deliberate act of the heart. Clara shifted in the passenger seat, the leather creaking under her weight. She pulled out her phone and the screen illuminated her face, casting sharp, unflattering shadows. She didn't look at me. She never looked at me. She just stared at that little rectangle of light as if the entire universe were contained within it. "We can fix this," I insisted, my voice rising with a frantic energy I hated. "I'll go to the counter. I'll buy a new ticket right now. It doesn't matter what it costs." I was already reaching for my wallet, the worn leather a familiar comfort in my hand. This was just money. The trip, the memory. That was what mattered. I could replace the money. Do you think I was too forgiving here? Still trying to hold on to a dream that was already bleeding out on the car upholstery? It was Clara who spoke next. Her voice, unlike Leo's, was not empty. It was sharp. It was a sliver of ice. "There are no more seats on the flight, Arthur." She said it without looking up from her phone. She said it with the same tone she might use to say the milk has expired. A simple, unchangeable fact. A door being quietly but firmly locked. And that's when the concrete in Leo's voice started to make sense. It wasn't the sound of a transaction. It was the sound of a verdict. My own son, my judge and jury. The car, once a vessel for our grand adventure, had become a cage. The air was thick and hot, and I suddenly couldn't breathe. I looked past Leo's head through the windshield at the families laughing and struggling with their luggage on the curb. A father hoisted a small girl onto his shoulders. A mother kissed her son's forehead. They were all moving forward, flowing into the bright promise of the airport, while I was trapped here in this silent, suffocating box. The world was still spinning, just not for me. "So, what am I supposed to do?" I asked. The question hung in the air, pathetic and small. Leo finally let go of the steering wheel. He sighed, a long, weary sound, as if I were the one who had burdened him, as if my very existence was an inconvenience he was forced to manage. "We'll call you a taxi," he said. "It'll take you right back home. It's for the best, Dad, honestly. It's a long flight. It would have been too much for you. Too much for me." The words were a slap. He was framing their betrayal as an act of kindness, a compassionate decision made for my own good. He was erasing me from our family's story and calling it a favor. He was not just leaving me behind. He was telling me I never should have tried to come along in the first place. That was the moment the denial finally shattered, and the cold, hard reality of it all crashed down. They didn't forget. They didn't make a mistake. This was a plan. A quiet, cold, meticulously executed plan. The muted phone calls, the tense silences, the way they never quite met my eye. It was all a prelude to this final, brutal act of severance at the gates of paradise. Leo got out of the car. The sudden rush of airport noise was a shock. He walked to the trunk and I heard the latches click open. He pulled out his suitcase, then Clara's, then Maya's small pink one. My brand new suitcase, with my loud, hopeful Hawaiian shirts folded neatly inside, remained in the darkness of the trunk. He slammed it shut. The sound was like a gunshot. A final, definitive end. Clara and Maya got out on the other side. Not a single one of them looked back at me. They simply grabbed their bags and began walking towards the sliding glass doors, merging into the river of travelers, a perfect little family unit. And I just sat there, in the back of my son's car, watching him walk away from me without a flicker of hesitation. He didn't just forget my ticket. He had forgotten me. Silence has a taste. After they walked away, after the automatic doors hissed shut behind their backs, the silence that filled the car tasted of metal and salt, like old blood. I sat there for I don't know how long. A minute? 10? Time had stretched and warped into something unrecognizable. A security guard tapped on the window, his face a mixture of impatience and pity. "Sir, you can't park here." His voice was muffled through the glass, but the message was clear. Move. Go. Disappear. The world kept moving even if mine had stopped. I slid over into the driver's seat. It was still warm from my son. The steering wheel felt alien in my hands. Driving home was like watching a film of someone else's life. The familiar streets looked strange, the houses tilted at odd angles. Every traffic light, every stop sign felt like a personal accusation. I saw a father and son in the car next to me, laughing about something. The boy couldn't have been more than 10. The man's face was creased with such genuine, unguarded joy that I had to look away. A physical pain, sharp and hot, lanced through my chest. Had Leo and I ever looked like that? I searched my memory, frantically sifting through the years, looking for a moment of that pure, uncomplicated connection. All I found were photographs, those beautiful, glossy liars. Back at the house, the quiet was different. It wasn't the heavy, lonely quiet I had grown used to. This was a hostile quiet, an accusing quiet. Every object was a monument to my foolishness. The new suitcase sat by the door like a tombstone. My passport and the printed itinerary lay on the kitchen table, a cruel joke. The whole house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to break. But I didn't. I walked through the rooms in a daze, touching the furniture, running my hand along the cool wood of the mantelpiece. I stopped at Eleanor's armchair. The worn leather felt like a wrinkled, knowing hand. What would she have said? Eleanor never minced words. She would have seen through Leo's excuses and Clara's icy silence in a heartbeat. She would have called them. She would have raged. She would have fought for me. But I didn't have her fire. All I had was a hollow, aching coldness. I sank into the armchair, the leather sighing under my weight. I saw it then, propped against the lamp on the end table. It was a framed photo of Maya, one Clara had given me for Christmas. She was smiling, a stiff, practiced smile for the camera, wearing a dress that was too frilly, too pristine. Her eyes, though, were what caught me. They were Clara's eyes, cautious, guarded. There was no real joy in them. Just a child performing the act of being happy. And I realized with a sudden, gut-wrenching clarity that this wasn't just about me. They weren't just leaving me behind. They were taking Maya with them. Not just to Hawaii, but into that same cold, transactional world they inhabited. A world of surfaces, of duties, of muted phone calls and silences that tasted like blood. A world without the messy, inconvenient, unconditional love that I had tried to offer. A world where a grandfather's grand gesture wasn't a gift, but a problem to be managed. This trip was never for them. I saw that now. It was for me. A desperate $30,000 attempt to buy my way back into a family that had already written me out of the script. I had tried to build a bridge, and they hadn't just refused to cross it. They had dismantled it from the other side, stone by deliberate stone, and then sent me the bill for the taxi. What would you have done if your own son did that to you? Then acted like he was doing you a favor? The hours bled into one another. The sun tracked its lazy arc across the sky, casting long shadows through the living room windows. I didn't eat. I didn't move. I just sat in Eleanor's chair and let the quiet of the house wash over me, feeling the full, crushing weight of my own irrelevance. The phone rang once in the afternoon. I saw Leo's name flash on the screen. I imagined him calling from the airport lounge, sipping a cocktail, fulfilling his final duty. The checking in on Dad call. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I had nothing to say to him. Or rather, I had too much to say, and I knew none of it would ever be heard. As darkness fell, a profound exhaustion settled over me, a weariness that went bone deep. It was the exhaustion of a man who had spent years fighting a quiet, losing battle he didn't even know he was in. I thought about the money, the $30,000. It was a staggering amount, the sum total of a lifetime of careful saving, of skipped holidays and patched-up coats. And they had taken it, not with a gun or a threat, but with a smile and a lie. It was the perfect crime. A betrayal so personal, so intimate that I could never report it to anyone. Who do you tell when your own son robs you of everything that matters? The coldness was creeping in again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just sadness, it was something harder, something sharper. I thought of my wife, of her strength, of the fire in her eyes when she defended her family. Maybe I didn't have her fire. But even the coldest embers, if you blow on them gently enough, can sometimes hold a single tiny spark. I closed my eyes, picturing their faces at the airport, turning away from me without a second glance. The image didn't just hurt anymore. It started to burn. There are secrets that live in the bones of a house. Not ghosts, but quiet truths packed away in the dark corners of closets and at the bottom of cedar chests. I wasn't looking for any of them. I was simply trying to erase the day, to put things away. I started with my suitcase. I unzipped it, and the smell of new fabric and my ridiculously hopeful Hawaiian shirts filled the air. I folded each one with a slow, deliberate precision, turning the loud, cheerful patterns into neat, quiet squares. I was putting the dream away for good. I put them in the back of Eleanor's closet, behind her winter coats that still smelled faintly of her perfume. As I pushed the suitcase into the darkness, my hand brushed against a small, unmarked wooden box. I didn't recognize it. It was a simple pine box, the kind used for keepsakes. It must have been hers. My fingers, trembling slightly, traced the grain of the wood before I lifted the lid. I expected to find old photographs, maybe a dried corsage, or the letters I sent her when I was away on business. I expected sentiment. What I found was an inch-thick stack of papers held together by a brittle rubber band. They were financial documents, bank statements, loan agreements, withdrawal slips, but they weren't mine, and they weren't Eleanor's. The name printed at the top of the first page was Leo's. The address was mine. The dates spanned the last 5 years. Have you ever found something that completely changes the way you see a person you love? One piece of paper that burns your entire shared history to the ground? I sat on the floor of the closet, the faint scent of my wife's perfume mixing with the dusty smell of old paper, and I began to read. The first was a notice from a credit card company, dated 4 years ago. A balance of over $10,000, the interest rate a predatory 28%. I remembered that time. Leo and Clara had come to me, their faces etched with worry. Their car had died, Leo had said. A complete engine failure. He needed $5,000 for a down payment on a reliable family vehicle. He'd sworn he'd pay me back. I gave it to him without a second thought. I saw the withdrawal slip from my own savings account, dated the very next day. And then, stapled to the credit card notice, a receipt. Not from a car dealership. It was from a high-end electronics store, for a home theater system. The numbers didn't match exactly, but the implication was a punch to the gut. The papers told a story, a secret narrative of my own life that had been running just beneath the surface. Each document was a memory, twisted and reformed into something ugly. A $2,000 withdrawal from my account corresponded to the week Maya supposedly needed emergency dental surgery. But here was a bill from a luxury spa retreat in Clara's name, dated 2 days later. A loan application in Leo's name, for a business venture that was a sure thing, which I had co-signed, guaranteeing my own house as collateral. It had been denied. But he'd told me it was a success, that he'd paid it off within 6 months. It was a lie. All of it. All the little emergencies, the sudden hardships, the unlucky breaks. They weren't acts of fate. They were a script. And I was the unwitting financier of their entire life, the silent backer for a lifestyle they paraded in front of me while feeding me stories of their struggle. My grief, the heavy, suffocating blanket that had been smothering me since the airport, began to burn away. In its place, something else was taking root. It was a cold, clear, and terrifying anger. It was the anger of a fool who has finally seen the con. They hadn't just betrayed me today. They had been betraying me, methodically and without remorse for years. The Hawaii trip wasn't a sudden act of cruelty. It was their retirement plan, their grand finale. They took the $30,000 because they'd already bled me dry of everything else and knew it was the last significant amount I had. The man who sat numbly in the car at the airport, the sad old man who drove home to his empty house, was gone. He died right there on the floor of his wife's closet. I looked at my hands. They were steady now. The trembling had stopped. The blood in my veins felt like ice. I stood up, leaving the box and its poisonous contents on the floor. I walked out of the bedroom and into the study, the room where I had built a life, a business, a family, on the foundations of trust and hard work. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over Leo's name in my contact list. It would have been so easy to call him, to scream, to unleash the hurricane of rage and pain that was building inside me. But that's what the old William would have done. The new one had a different plan. I scrolled past his name to a number I hadn't dialed in over a decade. Frank. Frank was the man I built my business with from the ground up, in a dusty garage with a shared pot of coffee and a single, unwavering vision. He was the kindest, most generous man I had ever known until you crossed him. And then he became a surgeon with a balance sheet, and he could find a single misplaced dollar in a sea of numbers with ruthless precision. He answered on the second ring, his voice the same gravelly baritone I remembered. "William," he said, a note of genuine surprise in his tone. "It's been too long." My own voice when I spoke was unrecognizable. It was calm, steady, and absolutely cold. "Frank," I said, looking out the window at the darkening street, "I need you to find everything." The phone call with Frank changed the air in the house. The quiet was no longer accusing, it was plotting. "Give me 24 hours, Will," he had said, and in those words I found a purpose. The next morning I woke not to grief, but to the cold, clear light of action. I went about the day with a strange, methodical calm. I spent the morning in the garden, pulling weeds, my hands caked in dark soil. Eleanor used to say you could solve any problem by yanking its roots out of the ground. Each stubborn weed was a lie I pulled into the light. The car engine, the dental surgery, the sure-thing business venture. I piled them up, a mound of deceit left to wither in the sun. At precisely 3 o'clock, a courier delivered a thick manila envelope. Frank had been surgical. These weren't copies of old bills from a closet. These were fresh, official documents that told a story of absolute ruin. Leo and Clara weren't just living beyond their means. They were drowning. A foreclosure notice on their house, 3 months behind on payments. The car I'd helped them buy was on the verge of being repossessed. There were documents from a half-dozen payday loan companies, each with a predatory interest rate. They had been living in a house of cards, and my money had been the only thing keeping it from collapsing. Then I saw it. The final document. A purchase agreement from a real estate developer for a new house in an exclusive development 2 states away. A deposit had been made. A deposit of exactly $30,000, dated the day after I transferred the money into Leo's account. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening snap. The Hawaii trip was never real. It was a story, a cover, a cruel piece of theater designed for one purpose: to get that money from me to fund their escape from the financial wreckage of their lives. They weren't sipping cocktails by a pool. They were packing boxes. They were running. The rage I felt the night before was a flickering candle compared to the inferno that now consumed me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a calculated heist of my life, my trust, and my love, executed by my only son. I thought of the 7-year-old boy in the photograph. He was a ghost. The man who had taken his place was a predator who saw his father as a resource to be depleted. I picked up the phone and dialed Frank. He answered immediately. "You saw it," he said. It wasn't a question. "What do you want to do, Will? We can press charges. We can ruin them." I looked at the purchase agreement, at the address of their planned new life. Justice through the courts felt insufficient. It was their kind of solution, loud and messy. My war wasn't about money anymore. It was about correction. "No, Frank," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Nothing like that. I have a different idea. I need you to find a number for me, the developer who sold them that house." I didn't sleep. The anger had burned away, leaving behind a core of diamond-hard resolve. This was no longer about revenge. This was about rebalancing the scales of our family's history. The smiling photograph on the mantelpiece was a lie, and I was about to replace it with a truth that could never be ignored. At 9 a.m. sharp, I had the developer's number. His name was Alan. My heart was a steady, rhythmic drum. "Alan," I said, my voice calm and authoritative. "My name is William Miller. I'm calling regarding the deposit my son, Leo, placed on Lot 74. I could hear him shuffling papers. "Ah, yes, Mr. Miller. A pleasure. Your son and his wife are very excited." "There's been a change of plans," I said. "You see, the $30,000 deposit was made with funds from a joint trust account. It required dual signatures for a withdrawal of that size. My signature. Due to a clerical error at our bank, the transfer went through without it. I let the lie settle, clean and corporate. My lawyers have already contacted the bank to reverse the transfer. I imagine the funds will be clawed back from your account by the end of the day. I'm simply calling as a courtesy." The silence on the other end was profound. I don't understand," he stammered. "Your son was so adamant." "My son is an optimist," I said, a hint of weary disappointment in my tone. "He gets ahead of himself. The purchase, I'm afraid, is void." I ended the call. I had not raised my voice. I had simply pulled a single critical thread, and I knew their entire tapestry was about to unravel. Then I waited. The first call from an unknown number came an hour later. I ignored it. Then another. A text. "Dad, call me. Emergency." They started coming faster. Leo, Clara, Leo again. They were a frantic storm of incoming calls. 10, 20, 50. By noon, the count had climbed to 96. 96 desperate shrieks of panic from the house of cards as it came crashing down. I imagined the developer's call to them, the dawning horror on their faces as their escape hatch was welded shut. They hadn't lost a vacation. They had lost their future. At 5 o'clock, I finally picked up my phone. I called Maya's school and confirmed the date for Grandparents' Day. I called my sister and told her I had a long story to tell. Then I walked to the mantelpiece and picked up the photograph of 7-year-old Leo. I didn't feel anger, just a quiet pity for the man he'd become. I turned the picture face down. The lies were over. The silence in the house was finally peaceful. It was my house again. The most powerful lessons are not the ones we teach with anger, but the ones we enforce with consequences. They thought my love was a blank check, but they learned its value only when the account was finally, irrevocably closed. What do you think Maya will learn from all this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.